up.
Okay. Anyway, we had a campus ministry, which was Wesley Foundation, and Rusty Best was the student pastor, and we had quite a nice group of boys and girls in this Wesley, we called it Wesley Foundation. It was Methodist young people's group, and we had the activities which were real interesting and inexpensive. For example, we would go on hikes, and we would hike way out in the country, because in the woods near, I think it was Varna, the name of the town, they had sort of a cabin, a camp, where people on an outing could stay. We'd go and stay overnight, in other words. Hike out there, and Nick was the hit of the cookout, because he'd make this huge pot of coffee, and everybody was making remarks about how awful it was. And he'd make a huge pot of oatmeal, and everybody was raving about how good it was. And two of our friends, one of them was named Mary Meter, and one of our friends was named Dave Carter. So we went out, they were all on this hike in the overnight with the Methodist Young People's Group. So one of those nights, Dave told Mary he loved her, and they eventually got married. I got a Christmas card from them last week. They're still amazing people.
Wow.
Then Bob Benscoter, and he married Phyllis. They were on that hike. Nick and I were on that hike. Elsie Thomas, her name was Elsie Schaefer. She married Tex Thomas. So this was a good group to be in. But we had so much fun with Nick. He was such a riot when he got going, and Bob was just as funny. And they'd pretend that they were adagio dancers or bullfighters, and he was a little skinny guy, and Nick was pretty big, so they'd do all sorts of contortions and entertain us. So that was a nice experience with college. Even though I didn't live in a dorm, I did know some people. And then after my grandfather got so sick, my mother had to go home, but I still kept this small apartment because I still had a couple of years to go, and it was too late to change. But I used to entertain Nick, and I had a tiny kitchen with a tiny stove and a table that had a fold-out leaf, so I could have a dinner party for 2 or 3 or 4 people. So I had friends over occasionally, but I studied once in a while too. And I said we went to all the football games, Lois and I and Elsie. No matter if it was pouring rain or what, we'd go. But that was about the only expense I had. I just provide my own food. And
did you miss Supergram?
Well, not really, because she would come back whenever she could. It's only 5, actually a little 4 hours, 4.5 hours from Ithaca to Brand. It's not much. And Carlton, of course, she was always so fond of my cousin Carlton. He was like her son, and he would come down sometimes. And one year we had Jean Borngraver, who's still my friend from my high school days, and she was a neighbor. One time she came and stayed with me for a while, got a job in Ithaca, and I missed my mother, but I was learning to be independent, which was important, because being an only child, you never get that chance. You know, people always do stuff for you, or think for you, is what it is. But in the meantime, my mother's boyfriend, his son was drafted, and he was in the Army all the years of the war, never got a furlough. I don't know what happened, but he was in the Aleutians, and he kind of thought maybe we'd have something going when he got back. But in fact, he gave me a ring one time, a diamond ring, but I knew we were never going to get married. So college was abbreviated, so I graduated from college with a BS degree in October of 1944, although my class was the 45, but I was ahead of my time. Ahead of the, I guess they had somebody that graduated, but we graduated in 44, and I already had a job. I'd been for the interview, and I was hired to teach in Corning. So they waited, they had a substitute teacher till I could get there. So starting about November 1st, I had a full-time job, and I was paid $1,600 for the year. That was from November till May.
Where was that in relationship to Ithaca?
Corning is about, did you ever hear of the Corning Glassworks? They're famous. They've made all those telescopes and a lot of optics, beautiful stuff. Steuben glass is famous. I'd say 40 miles, 35, 40 miles.
And so was Nick still at Cornell?
Yeah, he was still.
He had one more year?
Mm-hmm. He never graduated till 47.
Oh, because he was getting, did he get his PhD?
He was in the PhD program, but he got his master's, got a BS, MS, and he was working on his master's, but he never finished it. But he didn't have a car. He would get some guys to drive over to Corning, and then they'd stop halfway over at Elmira College, which was a famous girls' school for, I guess, rich girls. So these guys from Cornell would stop in and see if they could get a quick date or get somebody to go out with them for the evening. And then Nick would come to see me. So that worked out pretty well. We saw each other a few times. But he had a couple of jobs and trying to make some extra money. And one of the jobs was he was a graduate assistant. He'd help correct the papers or set up the experiments. And he worked with his friend who owned an apartment house, but was in the vet school, and if they had a dead animal to take care of, John would get the job and Nick would help him cut up the cadaver. That's what you do for money. It was a job that somebody had to take care of this, so they got paid for that. And Johnny was a landlord. He had to take care of this building. And in the basement of the building was a furniture store, so the guys worked for that man. Unloading trucks, I expect, positioning furniture in the store. But so I was at Corning from October to the first year, and it was horrible. Not horrible, but I had to teach seniors. The last level of the home ec series was seniors, and they were as old as I was. Some of them were 19 years old, and what was I in 1944? 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the girls, one of them they used to come and see me after school, like we were going to hang out together. We were all young people. And one of them brought around her cousin who was on furlough from the army.